It's live now. It's live now.
I remember.
Oh, Dave.
I have two jobs.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
That's terrible.
Okay, I'm trying to get it.
Okay, you got the interior view on the station.
Negative.
No?
Red screen.
Okay, nothing yet.
Negative. Supposed to see the inside of the space station.
Okay, well, he's live now.
Okay,
He's floating in.
yeah, we have a negative, red screen yet.
So you guys might not have enough juice over there to even pull anything down.
So should we just switch to audio?
So would it be better to just switch to audio?
Well, I mean, you'll see the audio. I mean, the audio
Can-
should come down.
We're not hearing
I
them.
hope.
Yeah,
You got it earlier with that programming, right?
No. Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Oh, yeah, with that thing.
Y'all didn't hear it today with the White House?
Yes.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
We hear static.
That's what's showing right now.
This is. Dave, ask them if we should just do the audio.
Should we just switch to?
Can we disconnect and just do audio?
So that we're not trying to pull any video or anything?
Hold on, sir.
All right.
Or no video.
Okay. Y'all want to try to reconnect?
Okay,
You have time.
all right.
All right, disconnected. We're going audio only.
Okay.
I just lost anyway, so.
Yeah, he actually disconnected. He's gonna try and connect with just audio.
Calling it a day.
Say much.
We're just having fun doing this one.
I think it's up to you, I guess.
Well,
I mean, it's-
Basically, it's almost-
It keeps cutting out.
All right, I connected the.
Okay.
Okay.
Does he need a 10 count?
Do you need an audio check?
Yeah, if you can.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, I got it.
Got it.
Don't copy that. Go ahead and do a 10 count again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're just gonna do audio.
So if that's the case, then I get a picture of it. I guess the shot like this will be okay. It'll still be.
But we have no audio coming in, Dave.
Won't be able to see.
Well, you gotta wait for the connection.
Plus we have also. Hi, sir. Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I mean, I'll be moving around.
I think you should be good. Okay, where you're at.
Just audio.
I don't know if that's allowed. Yeah, it's almost 2:15.
There you go. Pick your spot.
So we're gonna see his face.
Nope, we can't touch anything because I'm gonna talk to them. They're not gonna come back. So I'm just gonna keep going.
Greetings, Earthlings. I think I have you on the audio comm now, so I'm ready to get started when you all are.
Well, hello, is this Mark?
Yep, it sure is. Who am I speaking to?
My name's Kate Willett, and I'm here with a first grader named Owen Brown. I'm the principal. We're so glad to hear you, and we'll have a nice talk today. Owen's going to ask his question.
I'm really looking forward to it.
How old were you want? Were you
Sounds great.
wanted to become an astronaut?
I was actually probably about 24 years old the first time that it even occurred to me to try to become an astronaut. I was recently in the Army, and NASA told the military that they wanted to get applicants. And I was really excited about the possibility, but the first time it occurred to me as even something that was possible for anybody like me was in my mid-20s.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, next I have Arianna. She's a third grader. Arianna, ask your question.
Get chosen to go to space. How do you get chosen?
Arianna, yep, I understood the question. Thanks very much. I got chosen to be in space first by being chosen to be a NASA astronaut. And if you want to have that opportunity, you've got to go through school all the way through college to get a bachelor's degree. And then you even have to nowadays you have to get a master's degree to be able to be considered to be an astronaut. You've got to get 3 years of experience after that working. And frankly, I think it's not a written requirement, but you've got to be somebody who's done lots of kind of adventurous things, and you have demonstrated the ability to work really well with other people. It's a great question.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
All right, next I have Emily, a third grader, and she has a question for you.
What is an astronaut's job in space?
Emily, great question. That depends a lot on the mission for the space flight. For me, I'm in this very large lab that serves as one of the national laboratories for the United States. And my job up here is to serve as kind of a laboratory technician. There are hundreds of experiments going on right now as we speak. And my job isn't to create the experiments or to do the data analysis like a scientist would, or even to write the scientific papers or to do the planning. I just have to make sure the experiments work. So I'm kind of the hands and eyes sometimes of the primary investigators or scientists on the ground to help them make sure their science experiments work.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
I have another third grader here. This is Anna with a question.
How often do spaceships come to the space station?
And I think they come to the space station about once a month. I haven't done the math on this flight, but I know on my previous flight, when I looked at how many vehicles we had in 6 months, we got about one a month. So, and that includes cargo vehicles that don't have any people on them, that are just delivering cargo. So we get food and clothing and exciting experiments, and also people. So in fact, we've got another group of 3 people that will be arriving next week.
Cool. Bye.
All right, I have a third grader named Kyla with a question.
What does it feel like to be in space?
Okay, what does it feel like to be in space? The moment you first get to orbit, feels a lot like being on a roller coaster when it's going up really fast and then changes direction to going down. And you kind of rise up in the harness, because at that moment in the roller coaster, you're kind of falling along with the roller coaster. And that's exactly what's happening every moment I'm in space. This spacecraft and me inside the spacecraft is being constantly accelerated by the force of gravity towards the center of the Earth. So normally that would make you fall towards the center of the Earth. But what's happening with us is we're moving so fast horizontally that we keep missing. So we get to have this experience of falling, but it lasts, for me, it's going to last close to a year. So it's very much like if you're in this room you're in right now and imagine the whole building with no wind starting to fall towards the center of the Earth, and imagine the chaos as everything inside the room would start just floating off of tables, and people would, if they tapped the floor, they would go towards the ceiling. So it's a pretty interesting environment to live and work in.
What about if you go outside of the space thing?
Oh, if you go outside the space station, you're basically same situation, but you're in a very small spacecraft. Your spacesuit is really like a little miniature spacecraft. Every time we do that, we have lots of work to do. So you get very focused on your work, which is nice. But the view is incredible, and you also have to pay meticulous detail to what you're doing, because if you make a mistake, your life could be at risk. So it's a beautiful, exciting, and scary and exhausting time period. Is the best way I can describe it.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Halen, a fourth grader here for you.
What do stars and the sun look like in space compared to how they look on Earth? And are sunsets colorful in space? So
the stars and the moon, the sunlight up here because it's not filtered by the atmosphere at all. I actually, when the sun shines in a window, I have to move away from the window because it's so bright. Sunrises and sunsets are very colorful, but when we see them from space, we don't see it. The only part that's colorful is when the sunlight comes towards us through the atmosphere. So it's only because the atmosphere to us looks like a thin layer on the surface, just barely on the surface of the Earth. We only see all those colors in that thin layer, and everything else is either the Earth, which is colorful, or the blackness of space. So when you're on the ground, you see all the light you're seeing all the time is scattered through the atmosphere when you see that light. For me, I can get sunlight without it being scattered. And then the other part of your question was about the stars and the moon. They look clearer because that light's not scattered by the atmosphere. As long as we turn off all the lights around us inside, it's beautiful. It's kind of like if you're trying to look at the stars in a desert, but you're in a house. And you got to make sure you turn off all the lights in the house, or the window will cause a glare that prevents you from seeing it. Also, our windows all primarily look towards the Earth. So we get a very small slice of sky usually. I would love to have a big dome ceiling that looked away from the Earth and into space away from the Earth. I think that would be fantastic, but it would have to be very dark inside the spacecraft for us to see well. It's gorgeous. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
I've got Noah, who's a fourth grader next.
What is it like working at NASA when you're not at the space station?
Another great question. It's wonderful for me as an astronaut because to train for a space flight, I get to sometimes work underwater with scuba gear or in a spacesuit underwater to train for a space flight, to make sure we know how to operate in a environment where we need to use the ground control team and rely on our crewmates to make quick decisions. We fly in NASA jets, so we get to learn how to get close to practice piloting skills is probably the best way for me to say it. We get trained on spacecraft systems, which is very, very interesting to me. I get to study other languages because I work with international partners on the space station. So, and sometimes we have to attend meetings, and not all of those are exciting, let's just say it that way, as many meetings are. But even those, they're about space flight and the space program, making important decisions associated with how to do things correctly to make sure our nation continues to progress in our endeavors. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, I have another fourth grader here named Hattie.
How do you bathe and dress in space?
To bathe in space, we actually just use a towel that's in a package so that we can put it on a water dispenser. We set it to hot water, which is very, very hot. And then we can open the package up after we injected the water into it and just wipe ourselves down. Otherwise, we can't really spray water because it would go in every direction and just make a big mess. So what I do is I just use that hot towel to wipe myself off. There's a little bit of soap inside the towel, and then I use a different towel to dry myself off. And all I have to do is it's a pretty dry environment up here, so those towels will dry out over the course of 24 hours if I just hang them in front of a vent. That's it.
Thanks.
All right, next I have a fifth grader named Melanie with a question.
Can you feel when you leave Earth's atmosphere?
That's an interesting question. I would say yes, the process of going through the atmosphere can make the ride on the spacecraft feel a little bit bumpy, but honestly, the Soyuz spacecraft was such a smooth ride, I almost felt disappointed. I kind of wanted a more exciting story to be able to tell everybody. The moment that I will never forget, though, is the moment when we were outside the atmosphere and the thrusters on the spacecraft turned off. Because that's really the first moment I felt like I was in that free fall that I described to you. I was in orbit. And it felt just like I described earlier, like I had been on the top of a roller coaster And that moment on the roller coaster just was not ending for hours and hours.
Thank you.
All right, I've got a 5th grader named Blake next to me now.
On November 15th, you had to go into a lifeboat. Why do you call it a rescue? Why do you call it a rescue, a lifeboat instead of a rescue ship?
That's a fantastic question. I think when we think of lifeboats, we think of, for example, on a cruise ship, we have lifeboats. They're small craft that can operate in that environment, but they're kind of used as a subsystem of the. I think actually, can you guys mute the microphone down there? I'm hearing feedback up here. Okay, let me try it again. So the lifeboat is a part of the spacecraft. In my case, it's a spacecraft that is docked to the space station. So it's a smaller spacecraft. A rescue ship, I think of something that's got, the only mission it has is to go out and find people. So the spacecraft I used to get up here, it has a mission to transport people, but it's not designed to specifically rescue people. We keep it docked up here so that if we do ever have to abandon ship, much like a lifeboat on the cruise ship, we could get into that spacecraft, our lifeboat, and return to the Earth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up I have Dominik, also a 5th grade student.
How do you eat food and how is it different from the food on Earth?
So you have to be careful when you're eating food, and the type of food is important. If food is sticky, it's easier to eat in space because you can put it on your spoon and it won't float off of the spoon. But for example, there are some things like rice. The first time I ate rice in space, people warned me, be careful. I thought, oh, what are you talking about? I just stuck my spoon in there and the rice was very dry and it went floating all over the place. Same thing with sunflower seeds. With the rice, I learned that I have to use what I like to call food glue, maybe garlic paste or olive oil, something that will make the rice more sticky. So when I stick my spoon in there, the rice will stick to the spoon. Sunflower seeds, that's kind of weird to put olive oil or garlic paste on sunflower seeds. So I would go next to a vent where the air is getting sucked into the vent. That way, anything that escaped from the package wouldn't go all over the space station, would get collected on the grating for the vent, and I could vacuum it up later. Otherwise, the food's very normal. We have rehydratables, we have thermal stabilized foods, we have common off-the-shelf food products. It's quite good and lots of variety.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, next I have Frankie, who's also in grade 5.
How do you get more oxygen since you breathe out carbon dioxide? Do you have lots of plants? How do you get more oxygen?
We haven't gotten to the point yet where we're using plants to provide our oxygen and scrub out the carbon dioxide, but that would be a fantastic thing to get to that point. We do grow plants up here. In fact, we just grew some hatch chilies recently, and we got to have a meal where we put these very spicy hatch chilies into some of those food products I mentioned. We do have oxygen tanks, but we also have an oxygen generation assembly, and we can take water. And as you know, water is also referred to as H2O. The O in H2O means oxygen. So part of that water is oxygen, and our system can break the hydrogen, the heat. Oh, wait, I'm messing that up. My chemistry is obviously out of date. I'm confident that the O is oxygen and the H is hydrogen. So we can take the hydrogen and oxygen, separate those two, keep the oxygen and get rid of the hydrogen, and we're good to go. We can get oxygen out of the water.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Easton. He's a 5th grader as well.
How do you get into the space station?
Very carefully is the short answer. We actually, in a spacecraft, when you want to get from one spacecraft to the other, they have to, of course, dock to each other. But we have a hatch on the spacecraft, the smaller spacecraft, and a hatch on the space station. And there's an interface between the two. and we call that a vestibule. Before you can open either of those hatches, you have to let a little bit of air into the vestibule, and then we do a check to make sure that the air stays there. That means we have a good solid seal. And that's once we've done that, then we can go ahead and fully repressurize that vestibule between those two hatches. And once we have a common pressure, we can start to open the hatches and safely go from one spacecraft into the other. Great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Maya here, who is a 5th grade student.
What do you do when you're bored?
Maya, I like to read. That's my favorite thing to do. A wonderful thing to do that I can't do on the Earth very well is take pictures of the Earth from space. So I love it when I try to limit myself because it could become all consuming. On a weekend, I'll try to find 3 different targets to take pictures of. And recently I took a picture of Mount Everest, for example. It was the first time I actually was able to identify Mount Everest from space. Also, once a week, we have one person on the crew pick out a movie to share with everybody else, and the ground's really good about supporting us with helping us find the movie so we can watch it. So we have a movie projector up here, and we'd like to watch a movie once a week. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi. By the way, are you seeing the video up here, or not? Because sometimes I'm waving. I'm not sure if that's working or not.
No, Mark, we can hear you well, but we can't see you. We're imagining you floating in space.
Okay, imagine me doing lots of flips then, even though, I'm doing flip after flip. It's incredible.
Oh, if you could see us right now, we are all smiling, imagining that. That's very cool. I've got another question for you here from a 5th grader named Payton.
Do you go out of the space station?
We do go out of the space station. On this flight, I'm not scheduled for a spacewalk. That's what we call them when we go outside the space station. On my last flight, I did 4 spacewalks. And in fact, tomorrow, I'll be helping suit up 2 of my crewmates to do a spacewalk. So there is a spacewalk that if you want to watch, will be happening tomorrow, probably starting around 6 a.m. in your time zone and going till about noon. And I think you could probably watch it on NASA TV, which is available on the internet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, another question from a 5th grader named Amari.
Has anything strange happened in space?
Amari, by asking that, if you mean something that I can't explain, everything that looks kind of interesting or strange to me has had a scientific explanation. In fact, the most confusing thing for me was one time we had an experiment where it literally had to just put an object. For me, it was a clear plastic ball with a bunch of Skittles. And I used that to show that this video was really in space. But the next morning I woke up and all the Skittles were on the bottom of the ball. So it actually did a terrible job of showing that I was in space. So I called the ground control team and asked why. And I thought the explanation was really interesting. At any altitude above the Earth, there's a specific speed you have to stay at to maintain that orbit. And the center of gravity for the space station is going exactly the right speed to maintain that orbit. But if you're a little bit below it, you'll be moving too slow. And if you're a little bit above it, above the center of gravity, you'll be moving too fast to maintain that orbit. So if you have something below the center of gravity for the space station, it will actually be going too slow to maintain that orbit. So over time, it will gradually try to go closer to the Earth, which meant those Skittles ended up going to the bottom of the ball. So that was something that was puzzling to me, but it made complete sense once I had it explained.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to work our way right up to the buzzer here, but I know that we're almost out of time. If we do end early, I just want to say thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time, Mark. I do have one more question for you here, and that's from a 5th grader named Brooklyn.
What do you do with your trash?
Oh, gosh, we have one of our spacecraft, Cygnus spacecraft. Also, the Russians have a spacecraft called Progress. Both of those are cargo vehicles, and they deliver lots of stuff, as I mentioned before, but they don't return to the Earth. They actually will burn up in the atmosphere instead of returning to the Earth. So we use those as trash incinerators. We fill up that entire vehicle with all of the trash, and I mean all kinds of trash, because you can imagine even this trash from the toilet we have to put in there. So we pack it up really tight. We do not want the space station to fill up with trash, so we have to work really hard to get rid of stuff and make sure we take advantage of the opportunities to get rid of trash when we have it. But once that spacecraft undocks, it's like the trash truck came and it just leaves, and it burns up in the atmosphere.
Thank you.
Mark, I've got somebody that you're going to recognize. I think you might recognize her voice at least. She's a very special person to you. Her name is Jody. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jody. Great to hear your voice again.
Yes, you
Thanks
too.
for helping out arranging this.
You bet. I really appreciate this opportunity. I want to thank you for that, and also thank you for your service to our country.
Well, that was very kind of you. It's an honor to be able to do this. It really is.
One last question is just, we were really asking or wondering how you like to celebrate different events at the space station, such as 9/11 or Veterans Day or Earth Day, and then Christmas coming up.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can tell you for September 11th, one of the flight directors on the ground, actually, we just happened to be flying over New York City as the sun went down. So, and that flight director, he had a very close relationship with some people in New York City, and gave a very inspiring speech about the moments so many years ago where really it felt like our perception of our place in the world kind of changed. So that was a significant event for me, and it was the timing was amazing, because as we were going over New York City, you could see it. It was nighttime on the ground. The sun was shining on the space station, and then, well, actually, no. At first, it was nighttime on the space station and on the ground, so we could see the city lights really well. And then, just as he was speaking about the moments in 9/11 where everything changed, the sunlight hit the space station, which means for us, we can't see the ground anymore because it's too bright. The space station windows get all the reflections and it just looks completely black. So as he was speaking, it suddenly turned black, and it was very deep. We all were very quiet while we were watching that and listening. Christmas, we will have, it might end up being a work day for us this time around, because we have one of our spacecraft will arrive. But last time I was up here for Christmas, it was a work day as well. My Russian crewmates, though, as soon as we finished our work day, they surprised us with a Russian segment of the space station that was decorated for Christmas, and they had a Christmas meal ready for us. So it was really a lot of fun. Anytime, the biggest way for us to celebrate things up here is to just gather together with other people. We have 7 of us up on board, and it's always a nice event when we get all 7 of us together to hang out and talk. So that's really how we celebrate.
Thanks. We have a little special celebration message for you, because you celebrated your birthday in November.
It's your birthday, 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 birthday. Woo, woo, woo.
Happy birthday, Mark.
Happy birthday, Mark.
We hope it's the best year you'll ever have. Thanks a lot for joining us in little town of Peshtigo.
Thanks so much for that. That was really nice of you all. Hope you have a wonderful time, and thanks for helping make my day even brighter. Gosh, that kind of got me choked up.
Me too. Oh. Me too, Mark. It was good to hear your voice. Good luck with the rest of your vacation, or your International Space Station, I should say. And safe travels back to Texas.
That was perfect timing, guys. We did it right under the wire. We did it. Give a round of applause. Woo! I don't think